Welcome back to Routine Rundown, the show where we discuss the beauty industry and our routines beyond what meets the eye. I'm your host, Zoë Weiner, Senior Beauty Editor at Well+Good, and today we're speaking with Alexandra Keating, the founder of Uni, a sustainable body and hair care line. We're going to discuss sustainable beauty, particularly in relation to protecting the Great Barrier Reef, which is what Uni is all about, and get into why greenwashing is such a problem industry-wide. Before we dive in, don't forget to please leave us a review, share this episode with a friend, and subscribe to our newsletter linked in the show notes. That way we can keep the conversation going. Now, let's get into it. We are here with Alexandra Keating, who's the founder of Uni, a really cool new body care and hair care line that is totally based on sustainability and something that I've been using for months now. Alexandra, when did you guys launch? 6 months ago?
Actually, yeah, 6 months yesterday, which is crazy.
Wow. Yeah. So I've been using the products since you guys launched. I love them.
Amazing.
They're so chic. And we've chatted a bit about the brand in the past, and I love what you guys are all about. So I'd love to start at the beginning and just kind of hear how Uni came to be. Tell us the origin story.
Of course. Well, I come from like the tech industry. So going into beauty was like a whole new thing for me. But I think actually in a way, that's how we create it from the ground up. So I didn't have any assumptions around formulation or packaging. So I kind of, built it backwards, I guess would be the correct way of saying it. But the real moment for me was probably when I realized that I grew up going to the Great Barrier Reef. It's my happy place in the water there. It's amazing. And when I went back, it's changed significantly. And if you go to areas that are, high tourist areas, you can notice it's very bleached, almost completely white bleached. And that now what the tourist boats do is get you to scrub off your sunscreen. And if you're lucky enough to go further out from the tourism areas, it is much more colorful. So people are, effectively destroying one of the 7 wonders of the world as they're visiting it. And that just seemed crazy. And then when I started digging around, I realized that there weren't any good mineral sunscreens that people would want to use daily that was like luxurious and good for your skin, right? But they also, as I spent time with marine biologists, they were like, look, yes, sure, sunscreen, but it's really everything that goes down the drain. And so Uni's first name, when I first pitched it, like the working title was Down the Drain, and it was everything that went down the drain. And so then that's when I started looking at like body washes and all of these sorts of things. And then that's really when we decided that we wanted to be the first reef safe body care brand. And like, what does that really mean? And then it kind of all stemmed from there.
Yeah, I feel like until I learned about Uni, I certainly didn't realize that there were things beyond sunscreen that could impact the colors of the reef.
Yeah, marine life.
I have to tell you, I've been watching Planet Earth and Blue Planet for the first time. I don't know how I've been sleeping on that for the last 5 years or whenever it came out, but it's scary what's happening to the reefs.
Oh yeah, unbelievable. And there's some amazing moments. Actually, we discovered a new reef recently, which is like quite unbelievable, which is like this sort of the height of the Empire State Building deep. And that's a pretty cool thing. And so nature does have its way of working out. And what the coral does is it breaks off in fragments. It goes to cooler waters and then it gets stuck and then it builds. And even the reefs itself are migrating at about an inch every year. So they're quite smart and powerful, but we just sort of need to get out of the way, I guess.
Yeah. Explain to me a little bit more kind of how this happens and how beauty products can impact reefs.
Yeah. So, there's a bunch of different factors. It's not just that, but it's really, any of the toxic ingredients that we use. And it's not just skincare, it could be cleaning products, all sorts of things. But what it really does is enlighten, okay, well, if these ingredients are in our products, like what are we putting in our skin as well? And so for us, as we dug a little bit deeper, like I guess our no list sort of extends and is heavily regulated by like EWG, but then it goes into anything that will harm land or waterways. So, even though we're really focused on reef safe because, we give back to the coral and we sustainably source our marine actives, we actually also make sure it isn't affected to, rivers and lakes and things like that, any water streams. Yeah.
Amazing. And tell me a little bit about the product. So what does that look like? You took out all of these toxic, harmful ingredients. What do the formulations have in them and how did they come to be?
Yeah, sure. So I think maybe it's an Australian thing, but I'm very into body care and have always been. And I used to use like a very nutrient rich after sun, which was an aloe based. And so my first product was really the serum because it became our hero product. And I really wanted to find like a face serum base that I like loved and then could add these sort of like nutrients in there that would keep my skin, healthy and able to hydrate, whether I was like in New York and like harsh conditions and air conditioning and heating, or whether I was like in LA, like swimming every day. So the serum was the point where we made like a lot of decisions about the ingredients. And what we found was a way to sustainably source marine actives that would deliver 24-hour hydration. And once we cracked on that, that was really where our whole story is really about hydration. And body care is really about scented soap to date, and people really haven't done the work to create performance-based body care. And that was really like the beginning of the formulation process across the line, the Uni Marine Complex. Once we could give that 24-hour hydration without using any sort of chemicals, that was like a big aha moment for us. And we knew that we really had something that people would see noticeable differences while using.
It feels very 360 to me that you're getting these awesome marine ingredients in the bottles, and then you don't have to worry about what's in the bottles harming any sort of marine life. It's cool, that kind of circular vibe you've got going on.
Yeah, and we also have the upcycled olive oil as well as the base. We use organic glycerin and organic aloe vera. So like it's just a very high quality, luxurious product. And I think, even with the body wash, it's probably, even though it's a wash off, I think like you can notice, and the way I was testing it when we were doing it was I would cover like half my body with uni and half my body with other products or other things that we were testing, and be like, okay, well, is my skin noticeably more hydrated after doing it? And so there was a lot of like trial and error, which got us there, making sure that we had the right makeup in the formulation.
And as far as products go, what's in the line right now?
Yeah, so we're shampoo, conditioner, body wash, body serum, exfoliating hand soap, and then we're in the process of launching the clear hand soap, which is just the hand soap without the exfoliants.
And I know so many of the formulations are really facial care formulations, or the types of things that you would expect to be putting on your face. Why was that important to you, and why to really carry that into body?
Yeah, and I think that that's sort of like what I was touching on with the Australian body. Like I've always, I guess, worn sunscreen. I've always like heavily moisturized my body, and I use, an after sun rather than a moisturizer because I found it too thick, and I like to put my clothes on quite quickly. I don't like that drying time. And so that was a really important part in order to have performance-based products. And I was looking for things and I couldn't. The fact that I was using an after sun and found it like performing it to a greater extent than the majority of moisturizers out there for the body just kind of showed me that this was like a sector that didn't have like a lot of innovation. Same thing with body wash. Like a lot of the stories, and even if I look at it, they're like notes in the fragrance, but usually they're synthetic. So there really is no benefit. So when they're talking about chamomile or the benefits of these different, scents, it's really just marketing. Like there is no truth to it. So for us, it's sort of been really interesting. And on the consumer side, consumers really love the formulations. Like that's where we get the feedback from. And like yesterday, we got, a young girl who has like amazing tattoos. She said after using the serum, her tattoos are much brighter, and like things like that. And like really effective performance-based claims is like what we're really like love hearing from consumers, and was really the goal from Ernie. But obviously, because we did a lot of sustainability work as a brand, we talk about that as well.
Yeah, and I want to get into the sustainability, but there's so much Australian influence in everything that you're talking about. I'd love to hear kind of how that plays into it, because I've been learning a lot more about Australian wellness in general. I feel like in New York, we've had such an influx of amazing, healthy Australian cafes. We've seen some really cool beauty brands. Kind of how has the Australian approach to beauty and wellness worked its way into the products?
Yeah, definitely. I think the marine actives and just like that lifestyle, it's actually really interesting. So Mark Atlan, who designed Ernie, is French and lives in California. And I had just moved to California when we started, creating Uni. And I think through talking to me, or somehow almost like when I look at the design, I just think, wow, this is like so like quintessential Australian. And, there's some cool elements. Like I took a photo of the reefs the last time I was there, and Mark took the colors from that, and that's what the bottles come from. And so there's little things like that. But then there's also things just in products that I love. So like for me, I became really obsessed with Kakadu Plum like a long time ago. It's like, I think it's nature's highest source in vitamin C. Just, how do we find these products and just put them in a way that adds to the formulation, right? So for us, vitamin C is very key to like hydration and to the Uni story. And so therefore it makes sense. Lime caviar is really amazing because it's like a natural exfoliant, so we're trying to like kind of pull these botanicals that are very powerful on their own, and they'll kind of really support the Uni marine complex. And then the Uni marine complex comes from like those sustainably sourced marine actives as well, which I think Australia just sort of like looks to nature a lot more, but I also think that that's how we sort of grow up when we're young. We're sort of, we do like a lot of outward bound, and I spend a lot of time hiking and camping and those sorts of things. And so maybe we're just in nature a little bit more, or maybe I was. And so I think I've just sort of like carried these things with me. Like I worked on an olive farm when I was a kid, which is how I knew about the pips. And that's why I always love olive oil and I love to cook. And so like, it just kind of starts to fall in as you're building these things.
Totally. And the packaging you mentioned. The packaging is unlike anything I've ever seen. I mean, first of all, we'll talk about kind of the circular, the refillable, that whole journey, but also it just looks really different than the typical, green and brown bottles and the things that we kind of typically see with clean, green, natural brands. How did the visual identity of the brand come to be?
Yeah, so I really credit Mark, and I think this is something that I haven't seen in beauty a lot, where I think the creative director and the designer, usually they're within a house or people don't really like, talk about them. So we try and champion Mark as much as possible because I think he's one of, the best creative directors of his time. Mark came from the perfume world. And I think if you look at innovation in beauty and design, like perfumes are really kind of the leader and the forefront of that. And so I guess we took like a perfume approach, but for me, it was at the time I found out about him, then I found out he lived in Los Angeles. So I was like, done. And then I was in Kith buying a present for my stepson. And I noticed the Comme des Garçons perfume bottles. And I remember when my brother, who's 9 years older than me, when I was a teenager, he also had it. And I was like, okay, how did Mark design something that is so timeless and is still culturally relevant today? I don't know if you know what I mean about the Comme des Garçons perfume bottles, but they're like cement, glass, aluminum, like the packaging is in the platform, and so I really wanted the same thing with Mark. And because he had designed that and Kiara Weiss, the refillable makeup, like I kind of wanted those two components together. So like what you'll see from Uni is different sizes in the dispenser, you'll see different materials, you'll see collaborations, like, we really want to continue to evolve the product packaging as a platform. And so that was sort of a guiding principle. And then when you bring in the closed loop system, there's a lot of challenges. Like we need to be able to take the bottles back. We needed to wash them, refill them. We needed to have them identifiable. We needed to make sure that the refill and the dispenser worked well. We didn't want to create custom dispensers for every product. And so we had to make sure that the refills came through. And that's really where like the IP of the design is. So for those of you listening who've never seen this product before, but it's a beautiful dispenser and it kind of has different colored refills depending on what product you're using. And it's really the marriage between the two. But yeah, he's a perfume designer, so I give him the full credit for sure.
I feel like it reminds me of the types of very chic bottles you'd see in a hotel or a spa, and they feel really gender neutral in a way that I think is hard to do. So for our listeners who haven't seen the products, how does it work?
Yeah, so at the moment when you get your first order from Uni, it comes with like an order slip and then a label that you can peel off and put back on the box. And so just like you're returning from Net-a-Porter or something like that, it's the same thing. We just say, when you get to 5 or more refills, send it back to us. And so at the moment they come back to our facilities, we store, sort, wash and refill them. And so for the consumer, it's pretty easy. Also, the bottles are made from 100% recycled aluminum and they're 100% recyclable. So if you don't send them back to us, you can still put them in the recycling bin and feel really good, that they're going to be recycled. We are sort of getting to a point now where we're starting to talk to different retailers and thinking about things. And I think our ideal would be for people like in the real world, be able to drop the bottles back, much like you do with Erewhon and juices and things like that. But it's working really well. And so we're really excited. Consumers really do want to send it back and people are really opting into the system. For us, the price of aluminum's going up. So it's cheaper for us to recapture, wash and refill a bottle than it is to procure a new bottle.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah. So the product comes in an aluminum, recycled aluminum container, and then that goes into, and what are the pumps made of? They're recycled plastic?
Yeah, so the inside of it's a bioresin and then the outside's aluminum, actually. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
It's a painted aluminum. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it makes it really easy to dispense and easy to use, which we love. Why refillables? I feel like there are so many different kind of ways that brands are approaching sustainable packaging. Why did refills make the most sense for you?
Yeah, I think from a performance base, I mean, I looked at concentrates, I looked at dissolvables, and, I think as a brand, we'll continue to innovate and push. We just didn't feel like the performance was really there. And without that, like if it's products that we wouldn't use, then it wouldn't work. And so if we're looking at full formulations, then refillables the way to go. You really have to use glass or aluminum though, and I think for us, it's really making that shift away from plastic. Like even in the way that we're doing sampling and things like that, like we have little travel bottles, they're all aluminum. And so we believe it's the company's responsibility to be responsible for the end use of all of our products, and not on the consumer in any way.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned that this was your first foray into beauty. So I imagine with that and developing a sustainable brand required a lot of market research, looking at what all of the other brands were doing. What were some of the things that you discovered or were surprised about with beauty packaging? Is there anything that's particularly problematic that you didn't know about before? Anything that we should be aware of?
Sure. I think there's a few different things. So basically, there's a bit like the film studios. There's a couple of turnkey manufacturers that I would say power 80% of the market. And so they all use their own base formulas because it's quicker for them. Obviously, people come in, they want similar serums or moisturizers or whatever. So they use their own bases. I would say on the formulation side, that's the issue. So they're using these out of date, bases. The majority of them aren't clean. If they are, it's borderline. They don't really want to do the work to begin from scratch, right? And there's also cost savings there. They're saying if you use a base formula of ours, because we do it with so many other brands, you can get it for 80% cheaper than if you do your new one, right? So I think the problem is sort of like with who's really building these things. I think the second thing really leads into the components as well. So these people often source and sell the packaging for their products, and in which case they have already bought them in bulk. And so those are usually plastic. And then as brands like to customize it, they'll take, an outer container, a refill potentially, and a cap. They will source them from different forms of plastic, and they will probably dye and change them in some way, shape, or form. When you put those three components together, they're all different kinds of mixed-use plastics. They will never be recycled. They will live forever. And so I think at the base of the problem is really you've got to get these larger manufacturers to change. And I don't know how you do it and whether you tax it or whether consumers can become strong enough that they will start to demand it. I think the other thing as well that I noticed is a lot of people hide their toxic ingredients in their fragrances. So they'll print their IL, but they won't give the IL of the fragrance, and then they'll put the toxic ingredients in the fragrance. And no one's really showing 100% of their formulations all of the time. So I think there's like a lack of transparency, and as a result, they're able to kind of get away with things that they shouldn't.
Yeah. So I imagine with aluminum, even if people aren't sending back to refill, it's still recyclable, right? So if somebody's tossing that into their recycling bin.
Yeah, for sure. The only thing we ask people to do is just rinse it and put the cap back on because the caps are so small. They're not sorted in the system. And so you really need to make sure that they're on the bottle in order to be recycled.
Yeah. And you mentioned transparency, which I think is something that more and more consumers, I hope, are becoming aware of. How have you been able to share your formulations, and why is that something that's important to you, to show every ingredient where it's sourced from? Because you go on your website and it's all right there.
Yeah, so on our website, we have all our ingredients and we have it in use. So you can tell like what we use the most and the least of. So you could easily go in and sort of copy our formulations, I guess. I think, for us, like what I wanted was the hover state. So if you're on the desktop and you hover over an ingredient, it'll give you like what it is and the EWG rating. And the reason I did that was because the first time I got RIL, I like went through and had to Google every single thing. And because I wanted to be like, why do we need this in here? And so I just thought, well, probably consumers are going to do the same thing. We're also regulated by a bunch of different things, and we're in process with EWG, and we also have, paperwork for our sustainably sourced ingredients and all of these sorts of things. We go kind of out of our way on the certification.
Yeah, well, I think, greenwashing is such a problem. I think that it's
100%.
easy to put kind of green looking packaging on something and say it's sustainable. And then exactly as you're saying, kind of it's not easily recyclable. You're hiding things in the ingredient list. Did you come across, besides from what we've already talked about, any other sort of greenwashing red flags that you were surprised about in your development process?
We still have a long way to go, and we track and, we want to improve year on year everything that we do. And I think it's really just a mindset of like, what is your North Star and how are you getting there versus like making a move and sort of congratulating yourself in some way, shape, or form. So I see like a lot of brands like championing themselves. And I think the message is like, we're not there yet. None of us are there yet. We just like, what is that new standard, and how as an industry can we support that standard and sort of make these changes? So I think it's really just a philosophy. I feel like it hasn't hit, but I feel like it will, because the consumers are starting to make these choices.
I know. I feel like, thanks to TikTok and social media, people are really starting to ask better questions, and they're starting to learn a little bit. And our consumers are getting more educated, I feel like. So I'm hoping brands can't get away with some of what they've historically been able to moving forward.
Yeah, or just be honest about it and say, look, we're trying to change our formulations or our packaging, or, things like that.
And are there certain things that consumers can look out for in a brand when they're shopping if sustainability is top of mind for them, which it should be?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that the two real ones to look for, I would say, is probably in relation just to the packaging and making sure that it's 100% recyclable, because if it's not, then I don't know why they're using those components. And then in relation to the ingredients, I really think EWG is the voice that people need. We started working with them October of last year, so it is a very slow process. But in terms of people like brands that are really going the distance, I think that they're the true leader, in my opinion.
For anyone who doesn't know what the EWG does or how it functions with beauty brands, how does a relationship like with Uni and the EWG, or with a beauty brand and the EWG work?
Yeah. So we work with them. We send them, our IL. They go through, they ask us questions, and they will go through certain ingredients and ask like, to what degree is it in the formulation, and then what is the source or the byproduct of its use. And so it's actually just like a lot of paperwork would be the best way to describe it. Yeah.
Amazing. If you had to describe your beauty philosophy in an elevator pitch form, what would that sound like?
Yeah, I would say Uni's sort of face grade body care with the end user in mind.
Love that. And because this is routine rundown, what does your skincare and body care routine look like on a daily basis?
I am very utility based. So like for me, I just sort of cleanse in the morning. I use a light moisturizer, then I put sunscreen on, and that's really it for me for the day. Unless I have like meetings that like at night, I won't really put makeup on or anything like that. So I'm very skincare oriented, and then I'll cleanse before bed and then moisturize again. I'm lucky that I have, good skin, and I've never been acne prone. And so I've never sort of messed with a good thing, I guess. And then with body, I actually use our hand soap as an exfoliator, which I've been doing a lot because it's summer. But I will exfoliate or use the body wash and then the serum, and I use the serum daily. So I'm probably one of the few that go through the serum once a month.
Why a serum versus a lotion? Because I love the serum and I think it's so hydrating, and it's different than anything else in my collection.
No, I know. And I think that that's really why. So I was looking for a different format. So I had these actives that I wanted to use really because of the after sun. And I was like, okay, well, if it works for after sun, I've been using it for a long time. Like, why isn't that in the moisturizer? So that was really, where the ingredients came from. And then it was, what is the right base? And for us, serums are an amazing base because they're light, they absorb quickly, and there's no greasy residue. And I remember like in New York, I used to work out and then I put moisturizer on because I was in the gym, and then I try and put leather pants on or something. It was like a terrible idea. And so I really had to make sure it was, didn't have that greasy effect. So the serum was really a trial and error, but we're really happy with like where we got to. Yeah.
That makes me think of, have you seen the Friends episode where Ross has the leather pants on and he's trying to get them on with the serum? Oh my God. Yeah. I think
it's a thing.
Totally. And I think body care in particular, I think because the category is expanding so much, there's such opportunity to play where like everything feels really new. And a serum, like why don't we have serums for our bodies? We have serums for our faces, we have serums for our hair. I think it's an exciting time to be in body care, I imagine.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, maybe it's an Australian thing, but and because we all spent so much time in the sun, like we just took good care of our skin, and so sunscreen, moisturizer, it's really, it's just a daily thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the hydration element is also really important. I learned from someone who's in J beauty, for example, that in Japan, hydration is really kind of central to skincare. It's less about it's less about intense actives and exfoliation. It's really about kind of hydrating skin as the cure for everything. And it seems like this is kind of what you guys are doing too.
Yeah, I think our philosophy is the same. And the next thing you'll see from us is definitely sunscreen. And we've been working on it for a really long time, and so it's for us, it's about hydration and, sun protection. And that's the two things you can really do. And obviously in the hydration aspects, we have a lot of antioxidants like to protect against free radicals and things like that. So yeah, we're very hydration, SPF, body, face. That's what you need to do. And you'll be set.
Awesome. And where did the name Uni come from?
Yeah, sure. So I think I have this weird, I don't even know where I picked it up, but I remember when they were coming up with the name Google, the reason that they came up with it was because anyone could spell it and everyone remembered it, and so I never liked things more than 6 characters. And so for me, I wrote down all of these different names and I'd go out to dinners or coffee with random people and I'd give them 5 names. And at the end of it, I'd be like, hey, do you remember those 5 names I said at the beginning? What stayed? And so Uni people all remembered. But it really didn't happen until Mark. So when I was pitching Mark, DTC personal care, and he was like a perfume designer. So he was a bit on the fence. And then he goes, well, what are you going to call this thing anyway? And I was like, we're going to call it Uni. He's like, as in the sea urchin. And I was like, yes. And he started drawing refills and containers and just all of these different things. And then he recently had this Mark Newson chair, which we both love. And he had just covered it in an Uni colored, fabric. And then that was really, I hadn't even decided at that point. He put me on the spot and I was like, Uni. And so that's where it really became cemented. We never discussed it again. And that became the name.
Cool. Love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was amazing. I'm excited that you're launching a sunscreen because I feel like that feels like natural next steps and I can't wait to try it.
Thank you.
On the next episode of Routine Rundown,
a chemical reaction actually happens and it goes and eats the protein out of your hair. So when you're using Olaplex on the regular or putting it in your formulas, if you're a professional, you are mitigating that damage. So that way that chemical reaction never happens and you don't have something eating away at the protein in your hair. So your hair stays strong because protein, of course, is very important. That is the beauty of Olaplex because it's this unique patented chemistry.
On today's show, you heard me, your host, Zoë Weiner, in conversation with Alex Keating. Routine Rundown is a Well+Good Studios production. If you like what you heard, please share with a friend or two so they can join the conversation too. We also have a newsletter for you to subscribe to, which we've linked in the show notes for extra insight on all things mentioned in today's episode. And if you feel so moved, you can always drop us a line at podcast@wellandgood.com. Routine Rundown is produced by Taylor Camille, Jen Snyder, and Abby Stone, along with help from many other hands and brains at Well+Good. Our episodes are edited by Sarah Gabrielli and Maya Stone with additional production support from Malia Agadello and Ashley George. Our theme music was created by Nick Doss and our show art was designed by Natalie Carroll, Jenna Gibson, and Alyssa Gray.